Admiral Zexcalithar's secondary eyes scanned the data scrolling through his neural implant, while his primary vision remained fixed on the blue-green planet below. Earth, so vibrant compared to the engineered perfection of Arjaxian worlds, seemed to pulse with chaotic life even from orbit. "Admiral, the human delegates request your presence at their United Nations facility," his communications officer announced, mandibles clicking with subtle disapproval. "They insist on showing you their cultural achievements before beginning resource negotiations." Zexcalithar flicked his upper right appendage dismissively. "Their achievements are irrelevant. Our scans show they've barely harnessed fusion energy, and their space exploration is primitive at best." Yet something troubled him. The hegemony's preliminary surveys suggested humans should have destroyed themselves centuries ago. Their fractured leadership, emotional decision-making, and biological inefficiency defied every predictive model. By all logic, a species this flawed shouldn't have survived, let alone thrived. "Science Officer Fex Lore, your assessment of human technological development," he demanded. The science officer's exoskeleton shifted color slightly, a sign of discomfort among Arjaxians. "Inconsistent, Admiral. They advance in unpredictable surges rather than the logical progression our species follows. Their computing technology evolved remarkably fast, while their energy production methods remain nearly static for decades. They seem to experiment without direction." "Inefficient," Zexcalithar noted. "Yes, but occasionally producing unexpected innovations. Their global information network, what they call the Internet, emerged from military technology, but evolved into something our analysts still struggle to categorize. It's simultaneously a repository of knowledge, a communication system, and a cultural expression platform." The Admiral processed this information against his 300 cycles of conquest experience. Something wasn't adding up. Species with superior technology had fallen easily to Arjaxian diplomacy. First trade agreements, then resource treaties, and finally protectorate status. Yet the preliminary psychological profiles suggested humans might resist this natural progression. "What about their developmental cycle?" he asked suddenly, surprising his command staff. The question clearly caught Fex Lore unprepared. "Developmental cycle, Admiral. Their offspring. How do they mature?" Most inefficiently, Admiral. Unlike our gestation chambers that produce fully formed Arjaxians with downloaded knowledge matrices, humans emerge as helpless creatures requiring constant care. They spend approximately 1/5 of their lifespan in a state called childhood, learning basic functions and social behaviors through repetitive actions they call play. Zexcalithar's sensory tendrils quivered with interest. "Play. Explain this concept." "It appears to be simulated activity without practical purpose. They create imaginary scenarios, manipulate objects in non-functional ways, and engage in physical exertion that produces no tangible results. Our behavioral scientists believe it's a primitive learning mechanism compensating for their neural underdevelopment at birth." The Admiral's decision crystallized instantly. "I will observe these developmental stages personally." His second-in-command's carapace flared in alarm. "Admiral, protocol dictates." "Protocol serves the hegemony, not the reverse," Zexcalithar interrupted. "If we are to successfully integrate Earth, we must understand what our analysis has missed. Prepare a personal cloaking device and appropriate genetic masking. I will observe human offspring in their natural environment before meeting their leaders." As his officers scrambled to comply, Zexcalithar turned back to the view screen, his compound eyes reflecting Earth's oceans and continents. Perhaps in these inefficient children, he would find the answer to humanity's puzzling survival against all logical predictions. Admiral Zexcalithar adjusted his perception filters as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground. His holographic disguise, a nondescript maintenance worker tending to park benches, had fooled even the most curious of human adults, but he remained uncertain about the children. Several times, He caught them staring in his direction with expressions his cultural database couldn't quite interpret. The girl, Ellie Matthews, had been at the sandbox for precisely 47 minutes. The Admiral's chronological implant tracked the time with military precision, just as his neurological scanners recorded her brainwave patterns from a distance. The results defied Arjaxian understanding. Impossible, he subvocalized, transmitting data bursts to his ship. The child's neural activity suggests simultaneous engagement of analytical and creative centers at capacity levels exceeding adult human baseline by 37%. His science officer's reply came instantly. Equipment malfunction likely. Admiral. Human children possess underdeveloped frontal cortices. Such readings contradict all xenobiological precedent. Yet the evidence before his 4 eyes contradicted the science. Ellie's fingers moved through the sand with deliberate precision, creating structures that evolved minute by minute. What began as simple geometric forms had developed into complex, interlocking systems. The Admiral's architectural recognition software identified patterns resembling load-bearing supports, energy distribution networks, and most disturbing, theoretical spatial geometry configurations only recently mastered by Arjaxian theoretical physicists. A male child approximately Ellie's age approached, carrying a plastic bucket of water. "Watch a building?" he asked, crouching beside her. Ellie barely glanced up. "It's a city that uses the planet's magnetic field for energy instead of burning things." "Cool. Can I help?" Zexcalathar expected the territorialism common to juvenile specimens across the galaxy, but Ellie merely nodded and shifted sideways. "Sure. These areas need reinforcement for when the tide comes in." The Admiral adjusted his audio receptors, certain he'd misheard. There was no tide in this sandbox, yet both children now worked as though preparing for one. Within minutes, the boy had integrated his contributions seamlessly into Ellie's design, adding elements she approved with simple nods or suggested modifications with casual phrases, like, "What if we tried it this way instead?" The behavior pattern contradicted everything in the Arjaxian tactical database. Even Arjaxian strategic experts required extensive preparation before collaborative projects. These children were innovation sharing in real time without formal communication protocols or predetermined hierarchies. More children gathered, each somehow understanding their role without explicit instruction. A complex social dance unfolded before the Admiral's eyes. One would suggest an idea, another would improve it, a third would identify a flaw, and a fourth would solve it, all while maintaining the pretense of simply playing. His exoskeleton vibrated with growing unease. This wasn't primitive development. It was sophisticated collective problem-solving disguised as something inconsequential. The implications threatened every assumption in the Arjaxian Conquest Manual. When a sudden gust of wind disturbed their creation, the children adapted instantly, treating the destruction not as a setback, but as an opportunity. Ellie pointed to the collapsed section. "Look, now we can rebuild it with the spiral design instead." Zexcalathar transmitted an emergency priority update to High Command. "Reconsider diplomatic approach immediately." Human children display adaptive cognition patterns suggesting collective intelligence optimization through simulation scenarios. Current threat assessment severe underestimation. Await further data. For the first time in his decorated military career, Admiral Zexcalathar felt something uncomfortably close to fear. Admiral Zexcalathar slipped through the early morning mist, his cloaking field dispersing dewdrops as he positioned himself near the Matthews residence. After the High Command dismissed his concerns, he had taken the unprecedented step of extending his observation beyond approved parameters. No Arjaxian admiral had ever compromised a mission for personal investigation, but no Arjaxian admiral had ever witnessed what he had seen in that sandbox. Through the kitchen window, he observed Ellie at the breakfast table, apparently engaged in the mundane ritual of consuming nutrition. Closer inspection revealed she was arranging her food in patterns while her mother prepared what humans called lunch nearby. "Mom, can I have blueberries instead of strawberries today?" Ellie asked. The mother smiled without looking up from her task. There's a container in the fridge, honey. Zexkelithar's ocular implants zoomed in as Ellie carefully placed blueberries among her pancake pieces. The pattern was unmistakable, a precise representation of an Arjaxian quantum communication array, with the blueberries serving as node points exactly where energy would concentrate in the actual technology. When she poured maple syrup over the arrangement, the amber liquid flowed along pathways that perfectly mimicked quantum data transmission routes. His third heart began pumping emergency hormones into his system. This was beyond coincidence. Either the child had directly observed classified Arjaxian technology, or she had independently conceived of principles his species had required generations to develop. Both possibilities terrified him. His communicator vibrated with an incoming transmission. Admiral, the Council requires your presence at the diplomatic reception in 3 hours. Your absence has been noted. Understood, he subvocalized, never taking his eyes off Ellie as she consumed her breakfast, erasing the evidence of what she had created. The school day proceeded with excruciating normalcy until midday, when Ellie's class was led to the educational facility's art room. The Admiral positioned himself outside a window, adjusting his sensory apparatus to penetrate the barrier. The human instructor distributed what appeared to be primitive modeling material, clay, his database supplied, and instructed the children to create whatever you imagine. Most children produced simplistic representations of animals or crude geometric shapes. Ellie's hands worked methodically, her small fingers shaping the gray material with surgical precision. Within minutes, she had constructed a spiraling form with internal chambers connected by precisely angled corridors. Zexkelithar's exoskeleton nearly locked up in shock. She was building a perfect scale model of an Arjaxian dreadnought's propulsion system, not as it currently existed, but as theoretical engineers had proposed it might evolve in the next century. The clay model even included modifications that addressed cooling inefficiencies in the current design. When the instructor approached, Ellie smiled innocently. "It's a spaceship engine," she explained. "That's very creative," the teacher replied, clearly not recognizing the advanced engineering marvel before her. "Where did you see something like this?" Ellie shrugged. "Nowhere. I just thought it would work better than the ones in movies." The Admiral's cloaking field fluctuated dangerously as his emotional control slipped, a first in his centuries of service. His mandibles clicked in an involuntary stress response, producing a faint sound. Ellie's head turned toward the window, her eyes focusing exactly where he stood despite his invisibility. For just a moment, their gazes locked across species, atmosphere, and technological barriers. She smiled knowingly and returned to her work, adding one final modification to the propulsion design, one that even Arjaxian engineers hadn't considered, but that the Admiral instantly recognized would increase efficiency by 40%. "Your observational protocols have become compromised, Admiral." The science director's holographic form flickered in the secure communication chamber Zexkelithar had established in an abandoned utility structure near the human settlement. "The Council questions your judgment. 3 weeks observing primitive younglings exceeds all reasonable parameters." Zexkelithar manipulated the data crystal containing his latest recordings. "Director, with respect, these humans employ methodologies unknown to our sciences. Observe this footage from yesterday." The hologram displayed Ellie in her school's cafeteria, arranging food items on her tray. To an untrained eye, it appeared random, but the science director's posture stiffened as recognition set in. That's the Herculean Defense Formation, our most advanced battle configuration." "Indeed," the Admiral confirmed. "And observe what follows." In the recording, Ellie casually inserted her drinking straw through the precise weak point in the formation, the exact vulnerability that had cost the Arjaxians 17 vessels in the Proxima campaign before tacticians identified and corrected it. "Coincidence," the science director declared, though his mandibles quivered with uncertainty. "The human brain creates patterns from randomness. You're seeing what you expect to see." Zex Kalithar switched the display to a different recording. Ellie at a computerized learning station, supposedly practicing simple mathematics. The screen showed basic human numerical problems, but her fingers tapped out sequences on the input device that had nothing to do with the displayed questions. "I decoded this input pattern," the Admiral said quietly. "It's a perfect rendering of the mathematical proof underlying our transdimensional communication technology. Technology this planet shouldn't encounter for at least 3 centuries according to our progression models." The science director's hologram flickered as he moved closer to examine the data. "This is concerning, but a single statistical outlier doesn't." "She's not alone," Zex Kalithar interrupted, switching to footage of the playground where 6 children now collaborated on increasingly complex sandbox structures. "They're communicating through their play, sharing concepts our greatest minds needed generations to develop, and they're doing it instinctively." The transmission suddenly terminated as 3 older human children approached the sandbox. Zex Kalithar's attention immediately shifted to the developing situation outside his observation post. The 3 newcomers displayed classic dominance posturing, increased volume, expanded physical presence, territorial encroachment. "Get lost, freaks," the largest one said, deliberately stepping on the edge of the sandbox creation. The Admiral's combat systems activated automatically, identifying optimal intervention points. The sandbox children were outnumbered, physically smaller, and positioned disadvantageously, classic parameters for defeat. Yet Ellie stood calmly, making subtle gestures to her companions. "We're almost finished anyway," she said, her voice modulated in a pattern Zex Kalithar instantly recognized from his military training. Harmonic frequencies designed to diffuse aggression. "You guys want to try the new swing set? We just finished testing it." The Admiral watched in astonishment as Ellie redirected the confrontation, offering a seemingly superior territory, while protecting her group's true objective. The older children, believing they had achieved dominance, moved toward the mentioned equipment, unaware they had been manipulated through classic Arjaxian psychological warfare techniques. As they departed, Ellie turned toward the Admiral's hidden position and made a small gesture with her hand, the exact tactical signal for Operation Successful, used by Arjaxian special forces. Lightning cracked across the darkened sky as Admiral Zex Kalithar huddled beneath the wooden gazebo, his 4 arms working frantically to repair his malfunctioning cloaking device. Rain poured in sheets around him, providing temporary visual cover from any human observers, but his exposed position left him vulnerable. No Arjaxian admiral had been captured in 14 millennia of exploration, and he had no intention of being the first. "The power matrix is completely fused," he muttered, mandibles clicking in frustration. His diagnostic tool showed catastrophic failure across multiple systems, damage inconsistent with mere environmental exposure. The sound of splashing footsteps barely registered over the storm, until a small voice spoke directly behind him. "Your secondary dampening field created a resonance cascade when it interacted with the thunderstorm's electromagnetic discharge." Zex Kalithar spun around, instinctively reaching for a weapon that diplomatic protocol had forbidden him from carrying. Ellie Matthews stood before him, yellow raincoat gleaming in the dim light, rainwater streaming from her hood as she studied him with unnerving calmness. "You should have adjusted for Earth's higher atmospheric ionization levels," she continued, stepping under the shelter. "Our thunderstorms aren't like the ones on your homeworld." The Admiral's translator struggled to process her words, not because of linguistic complexity, but because the concepts she referenced required security clearance beyond most of his crew. "You know of my world," he managed, all 4 hands instinctively moving to defensive positions. Ellie shrugged, pulling a small electronic device from her pocket. "Not specifically, but your technology has certain signatures. May I?" She gestured toward his damaged equipment. Against all protocol and training, Zex Kalithar found himself nodding. She examined the cloaking device with professional precision, small fingers probing connection points that his bulkier appendages struggled to manipulate. Your power regulation uses a crystalline matrix, but you've aligned it on a fixed geometric pattern, she observed. That's why it overloaded. On Earth, we learned to use adaptive geometric progressions for energy containment. We, the Admiral asked, voice modulator barely concealing his shock. Your species has mastered crystal matrix technology. Ellie looked up, genuine confusion crossing her features. Oh no. Most humans don't know about this stuff yet. I meant we as in me and my friends. We figured it out playing with my rock collection and battery sets last summer. She said this as casually as discussing a favorite television program. The implications staggered him. Children, playing with primitive materials, had independently developed theoretical principles that our Jaxian scientists had needed centuries to perfect. How is this possible? He demanded. Your educational records show you've received no advanced training. Your species hasn't even unified its scientific measurement systems. That's what makes it fun, Ellie replied, connecting two components in his device with a small piece of wire from her pocket. Nobody tells us something is impossible, so we just try stuff until it works. My dad calls it tinkering. Is that not how our Jaxians learn things? The Admiral's secondary hearts nearly stopped as she casually named his species. You know what I am. Ellie nodded, concentrating on her repair work. Your ships have been in orbit for weeks. The grown-ups are too busy arguing about what it means to look up. She tested a connection, frowning at the result. Your power converter is completely burned out. I could fix it, but I'd need parts from my workshop at home. Why were you watching us at the playground? Admiral Zex Calathar stood rigid in the Arjaxian communication chamber, his exoskeleton darkening to deep indigo, the color of extreme distress among his kind. The transmission from High Command pulsed with priority markers he hadn't seen since the Centauri conflict. This mandate overrides all diplomatic protocols, intoned Supreme Commander Vex Morith, his image dominating the holographic projection. Extract the human child specimen designated Ellie Matthews for comprehensive analysis. Her neural patterns suggest anomalous development that threatens hegemony security. Stealth extraction teams are en route to your coordinates. Supreme Commander, Zex Calathar began carefully. I strongly advise reconsideration. These humans are not what our initial assessments. Your assessment period has ended. Admiral, the Supreme Commander interrupted. Your transmissions regarding the child's capabilities have been thoroughly evaluated. The Science Directorate confirms she represents a statistical anomaly requiring study. The extraction will proceed. The transmission terminated before Zex Calathar could respond, a deliberate tactic signaling that discussion was closed. He stood motionless, processing the implications with military precision. Extraction meant dissection. Analysis meant destruction. Despite all Arjaxian claims of scientific necessity, he had witnessed enough conquests to know the truth. They feared what they couldn't understand. Through his observation post's viewport, he could see Ellie organizing what humans called a science fair in the park. Children gathered around tables displaying projects that, to casual observers, appeared charmingly primitive. But the Admiral's enhanced vision detected something else entirely. One child's tornado in a bottle demonstrated principles of atmospheric manipulation that Arjaxian terraforming technology utilized. Another's simple electric circuit contained modifications that improved energy efficiency beyond current Arjaxian standards. And at the center, Ellie guided younger children through building a model planetary system that accurately depicted gravitational interactions the Arjaxians had only documented 3 centuries ago. They weren't merely playing. They were teaching each other, building collective knowledge through social interaction rather than directed instruction. His decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. For the first time in his 300-year military career, Admiral Zex Calathar removed his command insignia, placing it carefully beside his communication terminal. 30 minutes later, he stood on the front porch of the Matthews residence, his holographic disguise adjusted to appear as a middle-aged human male in business attire. When Ellie's father opened the door, the Admiral spoke without preamble. Your daughter is in danger. You all are." Mr. Matthews tensed, protective instincts visible in his posture. "Who are you?" "Someone who has been watching your child and has come to understand that my people are making a terrible mistake." Zex-Kalathar allowed his holographic disguise to flicker momentarily, revealing his true form. "I have approximately 17 of your minutes to explain before extraction teams arrive." To his surprise, Mr. Matthews didn't display the terror response typical of species encountering Arjaxians. Instead, his expression shifted to grim determination. "Ellie told us someone was watching. She said you'd come eventually." He stepped aside. "You'd better come in." Inside the modest home, Zex-Kalathar found Ellie already converting household appliances into what his tactical systems recognized as remarkably effective countermeasures against Arjaxian scanning technology. She looked up from her work, screwdriver in hand. "I was wondering when you'd realize they wouldn't understand," she said simply. "Did you bring the schematics for your ship's sensor arrays? I have some ideas, but I need to know exactly what frequencies they're using." Darkness had fallen over the suburban neighborhood as Admiral Zex-Kalathar monitored the Arjaxian tactical feed through a modified tablet Ellie had enhanced with components from the family microwave. A dozen extraction team signatures converged on the Matthews residence, their approach vectors precisely matching standard hegemony infiltration protocols. "They're using a triphasic perimeter establishment pattern," he explained to the assembled humans crowded in the Matthews living room. 3 teams of 4 operatives each. This is our most efficient capture formation." What continued to astonish him was the complete absence of panic. Where any other species would have devolved into chaos, these humans, primarily children, had organized with extraordinary efficiency. "Mom, we need more aluminum foil," Ellie called from the dining room table where she was constructing what appeared to be crude signal disruptors from household materials. "And Nathan, did you bring your rock collection?" A boy of perhaps 10 nodded enthusiastically, dumping a container of mineral specimens onto the carpet. "Got the quartz crystals you asked for. And look what else I found." He held up a dark metallic stone. "It's magnetite with traces of copper." Ellie's eyes widened. "Perfect. We can use that to amplify the deflection field." Zex-Kalathar watched in disbelief as children between the ages of 6 and 13 repurposed toys, kitchen implements, and electronic devices into a coordinated defense system. Adults assisted by providing materials and following directions, accepting the children's expertise without question. The Admiral's tactical systems continuously recalculated their survival probability, but the analysis kept failing. There was no historical precedent for what he was witnessing. "Perimeter team is initiating preliminary scan," he announced, reading the data stream. Ellie nodded calmly. "Activate the jammers, everyone." 6 children simultaneously pressed buttons on modified remote controls. The tablet display immediately showed confusion in the Arjaxian approach pattern as their scanners encountered unexpected interference. "They're switching to secondary biodetection protocols," the Admiral reported. "Just like you said they would," Ellie replied with a grin. She turned to a small girl holding what appeared to be a rewired gaming system. "Jessica, activate the biological echo pattern now." The young girl pressed a sequence of buttons with practiced precision. On the tablet, alarm indicators flashed as the extraction team's biosensors suddenly detected identical human signatures multiplying across a 3-block radius. "This is impossible," Zex-Kalathar muttered. "You've created a biological signature replication field using gaming hardware." The graphics processing unit was perfect for modeling biological patterns, Jessica explained with a shrug. "Ellie showed us how to modify it last week during our coding club." As the Arjaxian teams scattered to investigate the phantom signatures, Ellie handed the Admiral a device cobbled together from a baby monitor, Christmas lights, and what appeared to be a disassembled toy drone. "This should let us tap into their team communications," she said. "We'd repurposed the frequency modulation from my dad's ham radio set." The device hummed to life, broadcasting the increasingly confused reports from the extraction teams. The children gathered around, not with fear, but with expressions of intense concentration, occasionally high-fiving when a particular countermeasure succeeded. "We're adding their tactics to our game database," explained a boy of about 12, typing rapidly on a laptop. "Next time, we'll be ready even faster." Next time. Zexcalithar's mandibles clicked in confusion beneath his holographic disguise. Ellie looked up from her work, genuine surprise on her face. "Of course. This is just the first wave. We need to be ready for when they escalate." She turned to her friends with an expression the Admiral's cultural database identified as excitement. "Who wants to help me build a shield generator for the whole neighborhood?" Every child's hand shot up, accompanied by enthusiastic calls of "me," and "I know how." The Arjaxian Council of 13 sat in stunned silence as Admiral Zexcalithar's unauthorized transmission played on the central holographic display. The chamber, designed to amplify the Council's authority with soaring architecture and imposing technological displays, seemed suddenly diminished, almost primitive, compared to the implications of what they witnessed. "The human children have independently developed countermeasures to our most advanced systems," Zexcalitar explained, his image standing beside Ellie Matthews in her family's living room. "Not through years of research or formal education, but through what they call play, a developmental process we have fundamentally misunderstood." The science director's carapace paled to ash gray. "Impossible. Our analysis indicates their neural architecture is significantly less developed than." "Your analysis is based on static metrics," the Admiral interrupted. "You measured what is, not what becomes. Human intelligence isn't fixed at birth like ours. It grows through interaction, through failure, through games." On the display, Ellie stepped forward. Despite addressing the leaders of a civilization capable of destroying her entire planet, she showed no sign of intimidation. "Your species is born knowing everything you'll ever know," she said, her voice clear and confident. "You're very efficient, but you never get to discover anything for yourselves. You never get to be wrong, and then figure out why." The chief strategist's appendages trembled visibly. "Admiral, you have violated 14 protocols by allowing this transmission. The human child must be contained and—" "Look around you," Zexcalitar responded sharply. "The extraction team you sent has been neutralized by children using modified toys. Your most advanced scanning technology was defeated by kitchen appliances, repurposed by humans who haven't even completed their basic education." The display split to show footage from the neighborhood, where Arjaxian operatives stood motionless, trapped in improvised stasis fields generated by modified gaming consoles. Other operatives wandered in confusion, their navigation systems redirected by interference from fairy lights and modified remote-controlled cars. "We've been evaluating humans based on their endpoint achievements," the Admiral continued. "Their completed technologies, their formal scientific papers. We completely missed their process, the chaotic, playful experimentation that lets them leapfrog developmental stages we consider fixed and sequential." The Supreme Commander leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "That any attempt to subjugate humanity would be catastrophic for the hegemony. Not because they would defeat us now, they couldn't, but because within one generation, perhaps less, they would surpass us. They would study our technology, play with it, improve it in ways we cannot imagine because our minds are not designed for that kind of creative iteration." Ellie tugged at the Admiral's sleeve, whispering something. He nodded and addressed the Council again. "The human child wishes to demonstrate what I mean. With your permission." After a moment of tense silence, the Supreme Commander nodded. Ellie held up what appeared to be a crude drawing of an Arjaxian warship, complete with annotations suggesting modifications to its propulsion and weapons systems. "I fixed those design flaws we discussed," she said casually. "And I think I figured out how to improve your quantum field generators by about 300%. Want to see?" The council chamber erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. The Supreme Commander raised all four arms for silence, then spoke a single word: "Withdraw."